From religion to wrestling, gumbo to grits, politics to poetry, and all things Southern in between, this is Take on the South. Produced by the Institute for Southern Studies and hosted by the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of South Carolina, Take on the South examines the highs and lows of the American South, examines the truths and fictions of the country's most distinctive region, and picks the brains of some of its most accomplished students. To understand the South, you need to take it on, and that's what we'll be doing. Join us as we take on the South.
Welcome to Take on the South, the podcast of the Institute for Southern Studies at the University of South Carolina. I'm excited today to introduce a new little mini-series on the podcast where we want to highlight some of the students that we've had come through Southern Studies in recent days. We are fortunate enough, because of generous donors, to be able to offer several significant scholarships, but two that we really want to highlight in this little mini-series. We have an undergraduate scholarship we call the Neuffer Scholarship in Southern Studies, and we also have a graduate fellowship called the David G. Ellison Fellowship. We'll be looking at that a little bit later. But today we have one of the two recipients of the 2024 Neuffer Scholarship in Southern Studies, our big undergraduate award. We have Addy Lee here with us, and we're just going to have a conversation about her studies, what the South means to her, how the South and the study of the South shapes her academic career, her professional plans, and so on and so forth. And so, Addy, we're just happy to have you here with us today.
I'm excited to be here.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Addy, just tell everybody about you. Who is Addy? Where's Addy from?
Okay, that's always a hard question to answer. I am from Columbia, South Carolina, so I've grown up, I was born, raised here, lived here my entire life.
What high school did you go to?
Dreher High School.
Okay, so right down the road,
legitimately, like, I live in Forest Acres. I'm living at my parents' house right now. It takes me, if there's bad traffic, 15 minutes to get to USC.
Got it.
Very close. Which during my freshman year was a really hard adjustment. I was like, I should have gone somewhere else. But once I got into, especially Southern Studies, started to settle in and was like, this is where I'm meant to be. But let's see. My parents are both from the North, so I didn't grow up on sweet tea and barbecue. So I never considered myself Southern at all.
Nobody can be perfect.
Yeah, I know. I didn't have sweet tea until I was 16.
Really?
Really, like, legitimately.
Like, did your parents just have like some sort of, that's going to give you diabetes, or was it just like?
Didn't drink it. Like,
what did you drink?
My mom's a Coke drinker, and then mostly water. I mean, we were like no soda, like really chill, maybe hot chocolate. I didn't get to have coffee until high school. Like,
did your parents drink wine growing up?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That perhaps begins to explain it then. Because what you got to understand is one reason that Southerners drink sweet tea is because it essentially is for us what table wine is for Europeans.
And
right?
That's fair. Yeah. But I mean, it's still growing on me. I haven't really gotten super into it, but sweet tea was a big introduction to like real Southern stuff.
So it's weird. It's like you grew up here, but you grew up kind of parallel to the world, to the culture here, even though you're living in this place. Interesting.
And I think Columbia is a very interesting place in terms of like South Carolina. I feel like we're a different breed. Like, we think of South Carolina as the red state where it's more conservative. And my parents are both arts teachers. My dad's a band director. My mom's a dance teacher. So, I mean, I grew up in all types of visual and performing arts, whether that was doing art and being in school with different dance classes and stuff like that. So most of the community that I was around was community theater groups and any type of music or dance scene possible. So I was just around a very, like, I guess, niche and progressive group of people that in my mind was like what the world was like. And I just didn't really have a good concept of like everything else around me. It was just, oh, everybody's like this. And this is just how things go. So I think when I thought about the South, I thought about it in a very different way than I do now. And
So even though growing up in Columbia, did you think the South is somewhere else?
Yeah, which is really weird to think about now, but like it was this other place, and I was in Columbia, South Carolina, which was just, the college town with the Koger Center, and my dad's in the South Carolina Philharmonic, so I got to go to those performances, and then we went to different dance shows and all that type of stuff, and it was like very artsy-fartsy and not like anything else outside of that. So yeah, it was a very weird adjustment to start thinking about, like, once I got into classes here, like, oh, this is where I am, and Columbia is a very different place than what I thought it was in my little bubble before college. So,
let's kind of zoom in on that then, because I want to talk about your study of the South specifically, but I don't want to talk about the study of the South specifically yet. So you said you got here and you started thinking, you started recognizing, hey, going to high school, going to Dreher, this little progressive world I grew up in was kind of atypically Southern. It's kind of maybe not really the South. It's like a sort of island within South that is insulated from it, but you never really, but the old sort of saying, you ask a fish what water is and the fish says you ask a fish about water and the fish says what's water, right? Yeah. So here you are sort of saying, well, there's other people that think different ways and the South is somewhere else. We'll talk about how you got here in a minute, but when you got here, and by here I mean to Carolina, when you got here, when you kind of came the mile and a half up the road from Dreher to come to campus here, when you came on the other side of the Dunkin' Donuts, as it were, right? What did you start to notice that sort of made you realize maybe there's something more to this world than the sort of insular, isolated, sort of myopic vision of the world that I thought I knew?
Yeah, I think privilege really started to like catch my eye. I don't know. I feel like that sounds weird, but Dreher is a Title I school. So
what does that mean?
We have I think it's like 90% of our population at the high school is on free and reduced lunch. I would say at least 70% of our population was African American or people of color. So a lot of the people I was in class with didn't look like me. So I had a lot of different perspectives. Sure. And then I got here and I was like, where did everybody go? Like, this doesn't look like the Columbia that I know. And so it was a weird adjustment because I feel like I got this idea that college was going to have all these new different types of people. And there definitely are, but you have to find them in different like niche groups, whether that's in the Southern Studies department or in my public health classes or the clubs that I'm a part of. And especially at my time at Dreher, it was my senior year was 2021 is when I graduated. So like COVID was prime. So I was doing all of my classes online. And my best friend and I were just like, dude, this really sucks. Like, we've lost everything that we wanted to do. We were super excited for senior year. It was going to be like the best year of everything that we had done. And we had been super involved in everything from like marching band to different clubs and everything that you could do. So we started kind of like a support group, I guess I would say, to help us process, but also our peers process the things that were going on outside of class. Because I mean, the nice thing about college is like we talk about the things that are happening in the world, and like we can dive into what theory you could place behind it, or like what topic and content could go with it. But I felt like in college or in high school, a lot of the stuff that we did was like just centered around the textbook or what needed to happen. So we were like, we want to take everything that we're learning and like what's going on in the world and kind of like put it all together. And really it was just kind of a safe space for us, and then also a lot of our peers to just sit down and be like, dude, this world sucks right now. Like, we're going through a global pandemic and we're supposed to like act like high school is just still happening and everything is fine. So we took a lot of time to talk about everything that was going on with the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd. We talked about different reproductive rights when Roe v. Wade stuff was going on and how scary that was. And we also have a pretty big queer community at Dreher, so we talked about LGBTQ rights and stuff like that. And so I think I had this idea that when I came to college, I was like, everybody was going to think like me. Everybody was going to be really cool and from all these different places. And I think that's like something that ended up being better for me, that not everybody did think that way. I got so many more perspectives past just my own like niche one.
So you're saying, you had this group in senior year of high school that really kind of helps you process things and kind of helps you face like, okay, but everyone, it sounds like, was kind of coming at it from a very sort of progressive sort of perspective.
Right.
And so you get here to college and like, wait a minute, not everyone is a progressive. Yeah. Right. And you're saying that's actually good for you to kind of challenge your understanding of the world. Yeah.
I mean, it puts things into more perspective. Yeah. It gives you a little bit more of like a grounding and helps you figure out more things. It can help you be more empathetic in different ways too. I feel like that's something I pride myself in, is I really like to listen and talk to people and try to like just be somebody that's there for them. And I feel like having those different perspectives that I've gained from being in college is really helpful with that. And I mean, outside of that, I went to Preston my freshman year for
now.
living.
For those who are listening, don't know, what is Preston?
It's Preston Residential College, so it's one of the living learning communities we have on campus, and it is a leadership-based living learning community. So it's the smallest dorm we have. It's like 200 to 300 people, and you have to go through this lengthy application process to stay there. And ideally, everybody that lives there, based on their application, is supposed to be really passionate about leadership and involvement at USC. So, I mean, coming from COVID, I was like, I'm going to go all in and we're going to like do this thing. It's the perfect location. It's right across from Russell House on Green Street. So it's in the center of everything. And I really got to meet a lot of different people there, which was really cool. And also opened my mind up to a lot more things that I was uncomfortable with originally, or like felt really comfortable with, but then had to like relearn how to do things because we were coming back into like being in person classes instead of being online and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess coming to college, coming out of the like Columbia that I thought I knew, I got to see how wide of a range Columbia really had, and not being in the like high school bubble of your mom and dad will drop you off from place to place. Like, I mean, I could go to the Vista or I could go to the Koger Center on my own and stuff like that. And so finding different opportunities to like interact with the people at Preston, the people in the different groups that I was a part of, or just like exist in Columbia as an adult was very different and cool and eye-opening. So yeah.
So is that when you started to reevaluate what South meant in that way? So you started realizing maybe I am in a different place. And one thing I kind of want to add on to that that's interesting to me is it seems like maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the people that you might meet here that would kind of challenge your ideas and challenge a lot of these progressive ideas aren't necessarily the kind of people you would stereotypically think. There are a lot of, traditional sort of conservative Southerners here at this university, but almost half of the student population is from outside of the South. Yeah. It's from the North. And a lot of them actually have very, very conservative perspectives too. And it seems like in my sort of anecdotal experience with Northern students, one of the reasons they come to South Carolina is because they want to come to a place that they conceive of as being conservative, right? So they have a sort of fantasy of South that they're engaging in. When you're interacting with both other Southerners and with Northerners who are engaging with some idea of South here, is that when you started to kind of reconsider this sort of insular bubble of progressive South that you had grown up in Columbia?
Yeah, I think it also kind of changed my perspective on what I thought the North was too.
Interesting.
Because my parents moved away, like both of them moved away from the North. My
and where
mom's
are they from?
From Maine.
From Maine,
and then my dad's from Maryland, which
it's the liminal space transit. I mean, like it was profoundly a Southern space until in the mid 20th century, and now it's kind of its own thing.
I guess my dad would consider himself from the northern part, but
there's always. I mean, you go back, to the 19th century. There was these parts were very Southern, these parts were very Northern. Maryland's always been this sort of liminal space.
Yeah. So I just had this idea that, like, based on, I guess, social media and what my parents taught me and all that type of stuff. Like the North was just this massively progressive, beautiful like land where everybody has public transportation and, you know, big cities and stuff like that. Cause I mean, I had been to New York City and I had been to DC.
You just told me your mom was from Maine. That's about the least big city place possible.
Right,
and
right.
And Maine's very progressive, but it's a very weird kind of progressive.
Right. Yeah. It is very strange. Yeah. And I've only been there once in my life. So I've got this like idea that Maine is the woods and that's kind of just up there.
I don't think that's all that inaccurate, to be honest with you.
Yeah. But I think meeting people that were from places that I had this like preconceived notion of what it should be, and then them not being like that was kind of interesting. And then also, I was 18. I had the ability to drive a car and my first job, so I had money to spend. So like during fall break, I went up to Philly to go see my best friend, and that was really cool. And she's in a very like interesting group of people because she's a musical theater student. So they're from all over, but also very similar to like what I was used to when I was growing up. But I also went to DC and saw like all of my dad's side of the family that was up there. And that kind of gave me a different perspective as to like what Northerners are and like who people are. So it just, I don't know. I feel like I had a very different idea of, I think I opened my mind to what Southerners in the South could be, and then also changed my mind on like, I guess, stereotyping and like putting the North in like a very specific light in my brain. Yeah.
Well, then let's sort of bring that back to the sort of how you end up being the scholarship recipient here. So, what are you studying, right? And so let's just start there. What are you studying here at USC?
Yeah, I'm studying public health. Okay. I applied to all of my colleges to do computer engineering, did COVID online school for a year, and I was like, I would never want to sit in front of a computer again. I like people too much. So, you know, I'm still a woman in STEM, but public health is definitely where my heart lies.
Okay,
so,
great.
Yeah.
So you're studying public health here. So how did you end up knowing Southern Studies existed? How did you end up taking Southern Studies classes, and kind of have a sort of bigger question I kind of want to get into?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, I was kind of floundering my freshman year. It was hard. It was a very hard adjustment, much more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I thought I was just going to be like close to home at school, had my 2 double lives or whatever. But it ended up being really difficult. All I wanted to do was like get out of South Carolina. I was like, everybody that I know and care about is gone. They went out of state for school. And this is not where I'm meant to be. I took a global health class the second semester of my freshman year. And I was like, okay, public health is where I want to be. Like, this is what I want to do. Not everything is just biology and science. Like there are people and there's like good coming out of things. And then the second semester of my sophomore year, I took Southern Discomfort with Mindy Spencer, and that's when I was like, whoa.
And describe what that class was about. I know what that class is, but for people listening, describe what that class is all about.
Yeah, so Dr. Spencer worked through the history of the South. We went from colonialism all the way up to like present day, and talked about how disease and health shaped how we view the South now. Okay. And that's what really opened up my mind. First of all, we had to like define the South and like look at a map and be like, what would you consider Southern and not, which was something I had never really done before, but a very interesting like challenge. And then also looking at how like the stereotypes that I had in my own brain and I knew other people had about the South, how those are shaped by the way that health has impacted people in the South for many, many years was really, really interesting and eye-opening to me. And I feel like, especially with the public health problems that we have in America, we associate a lot of problems with the South, whether that be like diabetes. I mean, Eau Claire, the 29203 zip code, has the highest rate of amputations due to diabetes. And my dad taught high school there for at least 8 years. And I would have never known. I mean, he taught steel drums and helped kids like find music. But other than that, like, I don't think he ever thought about the fact that like people are literally having to get amputations due to their diabetes because they don't have access to the healthcare they need. And so looking at stuff like that, which is in the present, but also how stuff like yellow fever and hookworm shaped, you know, a lot of the disease management problems that we have now, as well as like stereotypes. Like we think of like the slow Southerner and like the draw and stuff like that, but really it's because people are anemic because they had hookworm and there was a parasite eating the inside of them, and you can't function if there's a parasite inside of you. So
So this sort of began your interest in saying, okay, so it sounds like there's two things happening. One, you think you know what Columbia is, and you think it's just Columbia and the South is somewhere else. You come here, right down the road, and suddenly you have, in those, mile and a half, 2 miles from Dreher High School, you've like stepped out of a massive bubble.
Yeah.
You've come into a place saying, okay, there is this thing called the South, and I've actually always been in it, and I just didn't know it. Yeah. And I'm seeing other people who are also from this place, maybe who didn't go to Dreher, but maybe went to another high school here in town, right? Whether it be Eau Claire High School, whether it be Flora, or those other high schools that understand this place called Columbia and understand this as a part of this thing called South, which I didn't. You've got that. You've got all the students from the rest of the South, and about a lot of students from outside of the South who come down here playing with these ideas, these stereotypes, these fantasies they have of South. And you'd get that, and suddenly you're having to start thinking through these issues. Then you take a class about public health in the South and how many of the negative ideas that you had about this place were actually shaped by quite literally sort of microbes, right? Microbes shape a lot of these sort of things, and suddenly you're like, wait a minute, maybe I haven't always been correct about this place, right? Maybe there's much more going on here. And so is that really what got you wanting to take then more Southern Studies classes and to think about the South in a more systematic way?
Yeah, I think Dr. Spencer really encouraged me to explore a lot of different things. And she mentioned that there was like one of the smaller scholarships that was like, I don't know if it's through our institute or if it's through the English one, but the like $250. And she was like,
sure,
if you want it, I will submit your name. And I was like, okay, I'll think about it. And like, then I would have to start thinking about like a minor and that type of stuff. But the more that I took her class and interacted with her, and then Dr. Toussaint, who was our TA in that class, and later I took a class with her, I really felt like I found a way to focus everything that I wanted to do with my public health career goals and aspirations. Like I know I've always really been into advocacy and really want to make a big change, and, global change is great and all, but there's so much power and good that can come from making a local change. And even something as large as like the South as a whole, especially in the US, needs a lot of help and a lot of advocacy for the people that live here with public health problems, whether that's funding or just education, or raising awareness of the problems that are going on here. So once I had a couple of conversations with Dr. Spencer and Dr. Toussaint, I was like, I think this is really where I need to like focus what I'm doing. And I know I don't want to be a doctor. I know I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to do like the public part of public health, not just the clinical level. And so having this new perspective historically, but also socially and culturally, I feel like can help me work with so many different populations because of the classes that we offer, and the classes that I've taken so far. There's just a lot of different perspectives that I can bring to the table, and I would say like a nuanced way to look at public health here, because I think a lot of the time we're like, this public health problem is happening, this is what we're going to do to fix it, ta-da, and it's like, that's not how it works when we think about the people that we're actually affecting. Like, you can say that you can make vegan soul food, but is somebody who eats soul food really going to want to put vegan in front of that and take away the pig from like what's being made with everything? So,
because that's not just a sort of health standpoint there. That's talking about one's ancestry, you know, how one, like it's a, putting the pork in the soul food, is not just a taste thing. It's also sort of participating in a broader historical narrative of remembering your past, remembering your ancestors.
Exactly. And I think since I've been able to take classes and have learned how to acknowledge like the history and the culture that comes behind the problems that we see now, I've found a better way to focus my public health knowledge and I guess drive and passion into a place that I've grown up in and a place that I've been around. But now, like, I'm in it and I acknowledge that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you graduated in May, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what are you doing after that? What comes next for Addy? You've got, we got a couple weeks left in this semester and you got one semester left. So
it feels like I'm going to blink and it's going to be
You're
done.
almost there. You're almost there. You're almost there. So what comes next for you then?
Yeah. So right now I am a program assistant at the South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. So that's Medicaid for the state.
Okay.
So we fund 70% of children in South Carolina, like their health care, pregnant moms and moms that have given birth. So we cover prenatal and postnatal care.
Okay.
What else? Breast cancer and cervical cancer patients, people with disabilities, and also people that are on Medicare, which is 65 and up, if they need extra circumstances covered,
right.
As well as people that are below the federal poverty line.
Okay.
So the really like fun and cool thing about this, as like boring as Medicaid might sound, is since I work in the quality department, we're working on finding ways to be innovative and create solutions to health problems that we see through insurance. So the power in that is like, I'm not going to fund you and I'm not going to give you the money to pay for this patient care unless it's this certain standard. So what can we do to change that standard, to change the way that health is happening? So we have a really high infant and maternal mortality rate in South Carolina. Part of it is a policy problem. We influence a little bit of that, but not quite as much. But what can we do to teach doctors how to teach parents, like pediatricians, to teach parents how to help their kids go to sleep safe at night so we can reduce the infant mortality rate? So preventing like sudden infant death syndrome by teaching safe sleep practices, or helping pediatricians and different doctors across the state learn how to recognize mental health problems in kids earlier so that way they can get help. And by doing the teaching and the funding work with that, we're able to influence a lot of stuff. So I've been able to take my Southern Studies perspective and my understanding of the South as well as South Carolina and look at things through a different way. I sit in a lot of meetings and watch a lot of people like make decisions, and then I leave them and I talk with my bosses and I'm like, this is weird, or like this doesn't line up for like who we are as either a department in a company as well as like who the South is and who the people are that we're serving, and like thinking about the perspective of the people, that need this care. Like, why are we doing things this way? And I think I'm able to push a couple more boundaries and think about things in a more detailed manner because of the things that I've done here. So with all that being said, program assistant now, I should have a full-time job when I graduate in May, and hope to continue there for a little bit, work on learning about policy and contract management, the really boring things like RFPs. So that way I can keep moving on through government work and figuring out how to start enacting policy and stuff like that.
Great. Fantastic. Well, that's all wonderful, Addy, and I really loved hearing your perspective on all this. And so I want to kind of ask you one question to wrap this up.
Yeah.
So let's say you're at a Dreher homecoming game next year, right? And you run into some kid who's 5-6 years younger than you, getting ready to go to college somewhere, maybe coming here to USC, and you start talking to that kid, and that kid says, why would you ever want to study the South? Like, the South is this backwards, conservative, red place, and, we're good progressives, so why would we even care about that kind of thing? What would you say to that student, and what would you say to someone coming? Why do you think someone who maybe doesn't share these stereotypical conceptions, stereotypical perspectives of a Southerner, which sounds like, your parents didn't, and it sounds like you at least at 18 didn't, what would you say to that person? Why they should care about this place, and they should get to understand what it is and how it is?
Yeah, I think even if we were this really screwed up, like backwards, all conservative, whatever place, it's important to be able to listen.
You said even if we were, so it sounds like you're
Yeah.
saying that's actually maybe not actually even true.
I don't think
so.
we are.
Okay.
But even if that were the case, I think it's really important to be able to sit back and take the time to listen to other perspectives. That's one thing that I like really, really, really like ingrained in my brain throughout my college career is the importance of listening to others and taking the time to understand perspectives from outside of your own. I think it's vital that like the only way that we can make change or we can do good things is if we can all listen to each other. So I think even though people don't agree with certain things that I would say or the way that I feel about things, there's still a lot of value in being able to at least understand and listen to other people, even if you don't agree. So that's what I would say to the first part. But I would also say giving the South a chance and taking the time to actually learn about it will give you so much more perspective to the place that we grew up and the place that we consider the South. And yes, there are those people that might be what we would consider like backwards or like super conservative or whatever. But I think we're much more nuanced than that. And I think the South is like the perfect place to gather so many different people. Like, I know we think of America as like the melting pot, but I feel like really if there is any representative like place of that in America, it would be the South.
Yes.
We've got so many different groups of people, whether that be people that came from the North and the West and wherever, people who have grown up here their entire lives, people who have immigrated, people who have emigrated, and whatnot. And historical communities, there's a ton of history here. There's indigenous populations and queer populations and people of color, and there's arts and there's food and all that type of stuff. I think if you take the time to look at what the South actually is and the people that are here, you'll realize it's much more complex than you ever thought it was. And I think the way that I like describe my mind change like and shift was I feel like I had this like internal like Southern phobia of like, ooh, I can't be associated with the South. Like that would mean that I'm conservative and I live in a red state and I support that. And past the point of like it's okay to be conservative and it's not a problem to like have different political and perspectives and stuff like that. I think I had to open my mind to the fact that the South really was much more complex than I ever thought it was. And so my mind changed and was really just open to so many different people and cultures, especially through like, I mean, in your class, we talked about the history of the South and like, you know, the classic stuff that you would think about with leading up to the Civil War. But I feel like that gives a perspective as to like the people that we see now and the way that politics are shaped and the way that economics and anything are shaped. And I took a Gullah Geechee class with Dr. Toussaint, and I got to learn about this population of people that, I mean, I'd seen my entire life going to the beach with the sweetgrass baskets. Like everybody knows what that is, but we don't really know who they are. And I mean, they're a population of people who were brought over because they were enslaved from Africa. They got to live on the sea islands and they were on plantations, but removed enough to create their own culture. And they were some of the first groups of people to be freed from slavery and finally like have their own societies. And they're this really resilient group of people that are so much more than just a sweetgrass basket. I mean, their food is so complex. They have their own language and dialects, and it's really, really cool to look at that. And I don't think we learned about that in school. Even if you think you come from a progressive place where we learn about all the different things, like I didn't learn about Gullah Geechee until I got here. So I would say, sorry to get back to the question.
No, this is
just
perfect.
like the South is so much more than you think it is. Even if you feel like you know the South, you don't. The people that think it's just a conservative place, or they've like fantasize and create this fantasy of like what the South is, it's so much more complex than that. And even if you don't think you can learn something from learning about the South, you're probably going to change your mind. Whether that's through what I would consider like the most basic history class to a very specific and like niche population study and like case study situation, or you're taking classes on like the music that we create here and stuff like that. There is so much more to look at and to like see from the South and understand and keep learning to understand what this place is, because it just keeps changing and it's not the stagnant place. It's very dynamic and it changes every other day. So yeah, even if you didn't care about history or the South to begin with, I would say take a chance to learn a little bit about the South, because you'd probably learn something about the South itself, but also maybe something about yourself. So yeah.
So much to learn, so much to be challenged by. Sounds like you have had your own perspectives challenged, and you've had the intellectual courage and intellectual humility to say, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's okay if people think differently than I do. That's a testament to you, and it's a testament to your own intellectual sophistication. And I'm so glad that Southern Studies has been able to be a part of that formation. And that's one of the reasons we are so glad to have made you one of our 2024 Neuffer Scholarship in Southern Studies recipients. Addy Lee, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much.
That was our Take on the South. Let us know yours. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at U of SC South. Take on the South is produced by Matt Simmons of the Institute for Southern Studies. Special thanks to Professor Dave Garner of the University of South Carolina School of Music for composing our music. Tune in next time for another Take on the South.